The most beautiful love story. Millionaire asks the waitress what she wants most. She jokes, a day off. Before the story begins, tell me here in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if you love heartwarming love stories, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow and continue bringing content that moves, inspires, and makes you believe that love is still worth it. The clock read 1:47 p.m. when Sophia Carter, her shoulders already hunched with exhaustion, balanced a tray with 2 glasses of wine and a bottle of still water. Her uniform was impeccable, but the dark circles under her amber eyes revealed that this was not the first hour of the workday. In fact, it was the 8th. Sophia moved with light and discreet steps among the tables of the luxurious restaurant. In the Whitmore Grand Hotel in Charleston, the large windows allowed natural light to pour into the dining room, illuminating the polished marble floors and chairs upholstered in light linen. The guests there ate lunch as if the world were made of silence, cloth napkins, and small, restrained smiles. As for Sophia, she took deep breaths between orders, counting the minutes until the break that almost never came. At table 7, a man in a dark suit spoke softly with 2 executives. Tall, imposing, with dark blonde hair, perfectly groomed, and grey-green eyes that rarely blinked. This was Bryan Bennett, 35, CEO of the hotel empire founded by his grandfather. The kind of man who made the environment adjust around him, not the other way around. Sophia approached discreetly. She placed the glasses with precision, not even disturbing the ice cubes. Bryan didn't lift his eyes, but for an instant he noticed her reflection in the window glass. A young woman with golden fair skin, her hair tied in a simple bun, her posture upright despite exhaustion. When she finished serving, Sophia took a small step back. That's when he broke the silence with an unexpected question. How long have you been working here? She started slightly. No one there asked that, especially not someone like him. 2 years, sir, since I lost my second job. This was the only one that gave me a chance, she replied with a polite, faint smile. Bryan frowned lightly. He watched the way she tried to appear steady, even though her hands trembled slightly. And what would you most like to receive if you could ask for anything right now? The question dropped like a stone into a calm lake. The 2 executives beside him knit their brows, surprised by the breach of protocol. Sophia hesitated. She didn't know whether it was provocation or a trap. Then she smiled with a gentle irony, her eyes carrying a melancholy she no longer even knew how to hide. A day off, sir. That's it. The phrase sounded like a joke, but it hurt like a muffled scream. For a moment, Bryan said nothing. His gaze, previously apathetic, fixed on her with greater attention. There was something about this woman, something he couldn't understand but also couldn't ignore. All right, he finally replied. Consider that you've just won. She blinked, confused. Excuse me, sir, a week off, all expenses paid. At the resort right here. I need to see how the service works from the other side. I think you'll be a good reference. Sophia's heart raced, but she showed no emotion. You're serious? I don't joke with tired people, he said, returning to his sober tone. She lowered her eyes, both startled and breathless. This was surreal. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say nothing. Enjoy it. You deserve it, right? Sophia smiled, her chest tightening. She didn't know why, but she felt that this moment would change everything, and she was right. The tray was still in her hand when Sophia took 2 steps back, trying to understand if this was a test, a prank, or some sort of cruel trick typical of elites. Bryan had already turned his gaze back to his executives, resuming a serious tone, as if nothing had happened. But for her, everything had changed. In the locker room, during her short break, she sat alone on a wooden bench with her hands still trembling. Her old cell phone read 2:10 p.m. No messages from her sister, no good news, just the same heavy, silent routine she had carried on her shoulders since she was 20 years old, when she lost her mother and had to drop out of school to support the household. A day off would be a dream, she repeated to herself under her breath, chuckling without humor. And now he decides to give me a whole week. Who does that? She tried not to dwell on it. She had already learned not to get her hopes up with unexpected gestures. People like her didn't get gifts from life, only more overtime and overdue bills. Later, at the end of her shift, she was called to the manager's office. Her heart sank. Was she being fired for something she didn't even know she had done? Karen Whitlow, the cold and controlling supervisor, greeted her with a crooked smile and a black folder in hand. "Mr. Bennett left this for you. Documents. For your time off. It starts tomorrow. You'll be staying in the executive wing of the hotel, all expenses paid." Sophia frowned. "Sorry, staying here? As a guest?" "That's what it says. And one more thing. You won't need to wear your uniform for the next 7 days. Enjoy it." "But why?" Karen smiled, but her eyes didn't match the gesture. "Good question, Carter. You must have impressed someone." Leaving the office, Sophia still didn't know how to react. Her chest shifted between fear and gratitude. She walked through the wide hotel hallways with her badge hanging from her neck, her worn shoes squeaking softly. The guests ignored her, as always, but in the middle of the main lobby she saw him. Bryan Bennett was standing alone, looking at his phone while waiting for the driver. He wore a flawless dark grey suit, his face slightly lit by the sunset light coming through the tall stained glass windows. She approached slowly. "Mr. Bennett?" He looked up and for the first time smiled. Not the cold business smile. A smile, almost human. "Having second thoughts about the gift? I'm just trying to understand why. Because no one should go through life without a single day of rest. Not even you. But why me out of so many?" Bryan took a deep breath. There was a shadow in his eyes that not even millions could hide. "Because you were the only person who gave me an honest answer today." She swallowed hard. "So that's it?" "For now, yes." He turned and stepped into the limousine without looking back. Sophia stood there, frozen between two worlds that seemed to be clashing inside her. The world of survival, which she knew well, and the world of possibility, which she still wasn't sure she could believe in. As she watched the car disappear through the hotel's grand entrance, something burned in her chest. It wasn't hope yet. It was something more subtle, more dangerous. Curiosity. The next morning, the sun hadn't yet fully broken over Charleston's sky when Sophia put on the light grey uniform that already knew the shape of her body from so much wear. Her dark circles were deeper than usual, and her head ached as if she had spent the entire night trying to figure out whether what had happened the day before was real or just a fatigue-induced fantasy. She walked through the hotel lobby like she always did, eyes down, quiet steps, metal tray under her arm. She pretended everything was normal, even though something inside her had changed. She felt like Bryan Bennett's gaze still followed her. Not the look of a boss or rich guest, but that specific moment when he had said she was the only person who answered truthfully. It was only when she got to the pantry that Karen Whitlow, the elegant and bitter supervisor with blonde hair tied in a tight bun and heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, appeared with a more elevated expression than usual. "Mr. Bennett wants to see you. Now, in his office." Sophia frowned. "Now? I just got here, and you're being called. I assume you don't want to keep him waiting." Her heart pounded. Her legs felt like giving out. She walked in silence through the elegant corridors, lined with fine wood, panels and paintings that looked more expensive than anything she had ever owned in her life. At the door to the main office, she hesitated, took a deep breath and knocked twice. His voice came firm as always. "Come in." She pushed the door open and saw him there, seated at a flawless walnut desk, in a spacious room overlooking the inner garden. Bryan wasn't wearing his jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his silver watch gleaming under the soft light. He looked up and smiled, a small gesture, but it was there. "Good morning, Sophia. Please have a seat." She approached hesitantly. She sat in the cushioned leather chair, completely out of place in that luxurious space. "Did I do something wrong, sir?" "No, quite the opposite." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I thought about your answer yesterday, and I decided to take it seriously. You said a day off would be a dream, so I'm offering you a week." She blinked, confused. "A week?" "Yes, 7 days off. Staying right here. Executive, wing, ocean view, breakfast included, massages, pool, anything you want." Sophia let out a nervous laugh. "Are you serious?" "I rarely joke with tired people," he replied in the same tone she had heard before. "But why? I don't understand. Maybe because few people tell me the truth, or maybe because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago." She looked down. His words confused her, made her feel vulnerable, and her heart, used to life's blows, didn't know how to handle sudden kindness. "With all due respect, sir, I can't accept. I have bills, and my sister depends on what I earn here." Karen appeared at the door the very next second, as if she already knew what would be said. "You will accept it, Carter. The order has been given, and it won't come out of your pocket. I've already adjusted the schedule." Sophia looked from one to the other. She wanted to say no, wanted to refuse out of instinct, out of fear, but something inside her, a forgotten thread of hope, spoke louder. "All right," she said at last, her voice trembling. "I accept." Bryan nodded slowly. "Great, you can go. Your stay starts tonight. I hope you enjoy it." She left the office with her heart racing, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Part of her said to run, that this was dangerous, that no rich man offers rest without wanting something in return. But there was another part that wanted to believe, just this once, just for 7 days. Across the room, Bryan slowly twirled, his pen between his fingers, staring at the garden unfocused. For him, the gesture had been small, a whim, but the image of that young woman looking at him with frightened eyes, nearly broken by life, was burned into his mind. And something in him, which he didn't understand, wanted to see her smile. What he didn't know was that week would change much more than just her day. It would change both their lives. In the late afternoon, no longer carrying a tray and dressed in simple clothes borrowed from the hotel, Sophia walked through the executive wing's hallways, feeling invisible and exposed at the same time. The room's view looked like a painting, the distant ocean, perfectly trimmed geometric gardens, and the sunset coloring the sky in golden tones she had only seen through the pantry windows. She had taken a long shower, put on a light dress, left on the bed, and experienced for the first time in years silence without guilt. But even there, surrounded by luxury, something inside her couldn't fully relax. On the other side of the massive resort, in his spacious minimalist office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Bryan Bennett stared at the report on his desk without really reading. His face was serious, jaw slightly tight, fingers tapping quietly on the dark oak surface. He still saw her face in his memory, the way she hesitated to accept the gift, how she thanked him with her eyes, not with words. It was strange. He had given away cars, bonuses, vacations, but never felt like he was truly offering something. He called his personal assistant with a firm voice. "I want a discreet background check on the employee, Sophia Carter, work, family, education history, nothing illegal, nothing invasive, but I want to know who I'm dealing with." The assistant nodded, no questions asked. He already knew that. When Bryan focused on someone, it was because something inside him was unsettled. That night, Bryan went up to the hotel's terrace. From there, he had a direct view of the pool area. It was dark, but soft lights elegantly illuminated the space. And that's where he saw her. Sophia was sitting alone on a lounge chair, a steaming mug in her hands. Her expression was serene, but her eyes stared into the distance as if talking to ghosts. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't taking pictures, wasn't making calls. She was just breathing. It was as if she were trying to learn how to be. In that place, a world that had never been hers. The next day, the dossier arrived. Sophia Carter, born in San Antonio, Texas, daughter of Mexican immigrants. Her mother, Dolores Marin, died of cancer when Sophia was only 20. Her father disappeared when she was still a child. One younger sister, Isabella, with a history of autoimmune diseases and frequent school absences. Sophia had been accepted to a public university to study nursing, but dropped out in her second year to take 2 jobs. The last 5 years, worked in cafes, laundromats, and finally as a waitress at the Whitmore Grand Hotel. No bank debt, no criminal record, never missed a single day of work. Bryan read everything in silence, closed the folder, and leaned back in his chair. His throat tightened. It wasn't pity he felt, it was something deeper, more uncomfortable. How could someone with a life like that still be so whole? He remembered spoiled heiresses crying over not having the right handbag for the week's event. Executives throwing tantrums over late champagne. And there she was, a woman who had lost everything, who carried the world on her shoulders and still managed to smile with her eyes. That night, for the first time in many years, Bryan skipped a business dinner. He stayed on the terrace, staring at the ocean, thinking about what makes a person stay standing even when life keeps breaking everything around them. And although he didn't know it yet, something inside him had begun to crack. On the 4th day of her unexpected week off, Sophia still wasn't sure if she was living a privilege or walking into a silent trap. She spent her mornings reading, old books left in the room, and her afternoons walking barefoot through the resort gardens, like someone rehearsing how to belong to a world she knew deep down wasn't hers. At night, she would sit alone for dinner in the area reserved for VIP. Guests wearing a simple light cotton dress, no makeup, no pretense, as if afraid of being noticed, and that was exactly how Bryan saw her that night, unadorned, unprotected. Sitting at a corner table, distracted by the glass of water in front of her, her eyes lost in the movement of the central fountain. In the room, he approached with steady steps but unhurried, as if afraid to startle her. "Is this seat taken?" Sophia looked up slowly. When she saw him, she swallowed hard. "Mr. Bennett, of course not." He sat down without waiting for formal permission. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a white linen shirt with the collar open and his hair slightly tousled by the wind. For a moment, he didn't look like the CEO of a resort chain. He just looked like a tired man who wanted to talk. "I'm not here as your boss. I just wanted to share a meal. Let's say, as a way of thanking you for your good work." Sophia hesitated. The waiter appeared without being called, and she noticed how quickly he moved for Bryan. With Bryan, everything happened before being asked. With her, everything took forever. "Thank you. But you didn't have to." "Maybe not. But I wanted to." Dinner began in silence. The sound of the piano in the background filled the empty spaces between bites. Bryan watched her. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone calculating the worth of each forkful. "Do you always carry that weight on your shoulders?" he asked suddenly. She looked up. "Excuse me?" "That tension, like you're always ready to run or defend yourself." Sophia set her silverware down. Her heart raced. He was seeing too much. "I don't know. I guess it comes with life. I just learned That the world doesn't take care of you, so you learn to take care of yourself. And you never get tired of that? The question was simple, but it hit deep. Her eyes filled with tears, despite her attempt to smile. "I'm tired, yes," she confessed in a low voice. "Tired of pretending everything's fine, but I can't stop. My sister needs me. She's all I have." He stayed silent, a dense, respectful silence. At that moment, Bryan no longer saw an employee. He saw a woman who had held up the world with her bare hands without ever asking for anything in return. "How old is she?" 21, but she looks 14. Her illness is degenerative. Some days she can't even get out of bed. I left her with a neighbor this week, but my mind is still there. Bryan took a deep breath. He felt something he couldn't name. It was as if all his certainties about effort, merit, and success were spilling onto the luxurious floor of the restaurant. "Have you ever thought about going back to school, finishing college?" She smiled, a smile that hurt because it was so real. "I have, every day, but dreams don't pay the bills, and taking care of her takes time. I work to keep things together. That's it, there's no room for what-ifs." He didn't respond, but inside him something cracked. Courage. That's what she had. And he, despite everything he owned, had never known what it was like to live without a safety net. Sophia quickly wiped her eyes with the napkin and picked her fork back up. She tried to play it off. "Sorry, I don't usually cry during thank you dinners," she said with a gentle irony that mixed shame with strength. "And I don't usually have dinner with real people," he replied, not smiling. She looked at him again, for the first time, without fear. He saw her, truly saw her. But before he could say anything else, a buzz from his phone vibrated on the table. Bryan looked at the screen, frowning. A notification with Karen's name flashed. He turned the phone off. "Sorry, that can wait." Sophia noticed the gesture, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was bothering someone important. She felt like she was the one who, somehow, mattered. But neither of them knew that this night of confession would open a much deeper wound, and a door that could no longer be closed. Dinner ended with a strange lightness in Sophia's chest. For the first time in years, she slept with her head on a soft pillow without the crushing weight of survival. She felt seen, not as a waitress, not as an employee, but as a woman. And for a moment, that was enough. But for Karen Whitlow, that closeness was unacceptable. She watched everything with sharp eyes, hidden behind rigid elegance and a perfume too bitter to go unnoticed. She had been Bryan's lover for a brief, strategic time, with no real involvement, but enough for her to feel entitled to a place that was never promised to her. And now, seeing that simple girl, with her cheap uniform and history marked by struggle, taking up space in Bryan's attention, it cut her ego like a blade. She needs to be gone. Fast, she muttered to herself, reviewing security footage on the hotel's internal system. That's when she found what she was looking for. An old recording from weeks ago, showing Sophia collecting tip envelopes left by guests at different tables, while the other waiters were still cleaning other areas. Nothing against the rules. It was standard procedure during closing shifts, but with a clever edit, an altered audio track, and a subtitle suggesting bad intentions, the video became something else. Karen knew exactly how to manipulate the footage. The next morning, the file landed on Bryan's desk with a handwritten note. "You trust too easily in eyes you barely know." He watched the video alone. Sophia appeared walking quickly, picking up tips and putting them in her apron pocket. There was no audio, just the footage and the caption. "Misconduct record. Funds diverted during night shift." Bryan's heart sank. He wanted not to believe it. But the instinct for control, that old habit of never being fooled, spoke louder. He called Karen in immediately. Are you sure about this? She nodded, a fake look of regret on her face. Absolutely. Bryan, I warned you that girl wasn't what she seemed. Too clever for someone who lives off tips. He narrowed his eyes, jaw clenched. All right, bring her in, now. Sophia was interrupted while reading by the pool. She still wore the white dress, her hair down, and looked at peace. When she saw the security guard approaching with a message, her stomach turned. Can you come with me to Mr. Bennett's office? She walked in silence. The hallway, which had once felt like part of a dream, now felt like a cold tunnel. When she entered, she found Bryan with a cold stare. No smile, no invitation to sit. Do you know why you're here? Sophia looked around, confused. No, sir. He turned the monitor and hit play. She watched every second, the edited video, the clear suggestion that she was stealing. That's not true, she whispered, her voice shaking. You're telling me this was manipulated. I'm telling you it's a lie. I've never taken a cent that wasn't mine. Aren't the other servers? Review the full footage, please. But Bryan looked away. Doubt had already taken root, and he was not a man who made room for uncertainty. You're dismissed, Carter. Effective immediately. Your contract is terminated. Have your things removed today. His voice was cold, harsh, as if he had never shared a dinner with her. As if nothing had happened. Sophia stood frozen. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. I thought you were different, she said, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. She turned, walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped and looked back one last time. No matter what they say about me, Mr. Bennett, I know who I am. And then she left. No yelling, no justifications, no outbursts, but something inside her broke. In the lobby, with her eyes still wet and her steps unsteady, she passed smiling tourists, co-workers who knew her by sight, expensive flowers and golden mirrors. No one saw her. She was just another girl leaving the hotel with a backpack on her shoulder, alone, fired for something she didn't do, and from upstairs, behind a discreet curtain, Karen watched it all with a faint smile. The game was done, but what she didn't know was that the truth can't stay hidden forever. In the days following Sophia's dismissal, the hotel seemed to operate normally. The lights stayed on, the well-dressed guests kept arriving with their leather suitcases, and the restaurant served its pricey dishes with surgical perfection. But inside Bryan, nothing felt the same. He tried to carry on with meetings and reports, but one phrase wouldn't leave his mind. I know who I am. That voice. The steadiness in her eyes, even when hurt, the lack of desperation, as if she had grown used to injustice. He tried to convince himself he had done the right thing, that it was better to act coldly than take risks. But something wasn't right. The truth, that he had long learned to ignore for convenience, was starting to scream. It was on a grey afternoon, while reviewing camera footage due to a security complaint, that everything fell apart. The hotel technician came in with the files, a straightforward man who had worked there for years and deeply respected the entire staff, including Sophia. Mr. Bennett, I found something strange in the file Ms. Karen sent about Ms. Carter, he said, handing over a flash drive. Bryan plugged it in and watched. The footage that had convinced him was manipulated. Abrupt cuts, missing segments, captions added later. And the most devastating part, the original file showed exactly the opposite. Sophia was collecting co-workers' tips to bring to the back room, as was standard procedure. She even paused to check that nothing was left behind. It was clear. She was organizing, not stealing. The truth cut through him like a blade. He closed the laptop and sat in silence for a few seconds. Then he looked at the technician and asked in a quiet voice, "Who else has seen this?" "No one. I brought it straight to you." Bryan stood slowly, walked to the office window and looked at the garden where Sophia used to sit. It was empty, just like he felt inside. Sophia was punished. "For being honest," he murmured, voice cracking. The next morning, he summoned Karen to the main meeting room. It was just the two of them. The tension was thick. "Do you have something to tell me, Karen?" She crossed her legs with poise, still trying to hold on to her confident mask. "I don't know what you're talking about, Bryan." He slid the flash drive across the table. "You know." She stayed silent for a few seconds, then tried to smile. "It was just a way to protect you. That girl was distracting you. You destroyed an innocent person's reputation. You made me make a mistake, and that, Karen, I can't forgive. Bryan, you're fired. Effective immediately. And I don't want to see you in this hotel again." Karen stood slowly, pride wounded, her face tight. "You'll regret choosing a maid over me. She never had to be above anyone to teach me what you never had, integrity." She left with sharp steps, heels echoing. But the sound Bryan heard was something else, his own conscience breaking. In the days that followed, he tried to find her. He called, sent word through her neighbor, visited the modest neighborhood where she lived. But the house was empty, the lights were off. A neighbor said she'd left suddenly, with just a few bags. "She left everything behind," the man said she was starting over. Somewhere she wouldn't be judged without being heard. Bryan walked away with a knot in his stomach. He sat in his car, leaned his head on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. She's gone. The woman he had judged, abandoned, and, deep down, admired, was now just an absence. And for the first time in his life, he felt the weight not of professional failure, but of having let down someone who had only given him the truth. But Bryan Bennett wasn't the kind of man who left things unfinished, not even when he was the one who broke it all. Autumn had taken over Charleston, painting the streets with golden leaves and a cold wind that whispered like memories of what was left behind. For Bryan Bennett, each day without news of Sophia was an ache that gnawed inside him. He hired a discreet search team, but with strict orders, nothing invasive, nothing that would expose her. He just wanted to know she was okay. Months passed, until one day a name showed up on a simple report, printed on recycled paper: Sophia Carter. Listed as a temporary worker at a nursing home in Savannah, a nearby, humbler city, far from the glitz of the resorts. The next afternoon, Bryan drove there himself. The building was modest, with red bricks, a small front garden, and flowers that looked barely tended. Inside, the smell was of powder, warm soup, and time. The walls held old photographs, and the hallways carried silences that lasted too long. It was in room 4B that he saw her. Sophia was sitting next to an elderly woman in a wheelchair, gently brushing her white hair. She wore a simple light blue uniform, her badge hanging from her chest, and her hair tied in a loose bun. But it was her, calm, focused, as if everything she had lived had been swallowed by time. Bryan stood in the doorway, not brave enough to enter. Only after the elderly woman had fallen asleep did Sophia turn to leave and saw him. She froze instantly. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. So did his. "Sophia," he said softly, almost like an apology. She took a step back, her eyes narrowed. There was no surprise, no anger, something worse. There was hurt. "No, you can't be here," she said firmly. "I waited for you. I searched for you. I needed to see you, to ask for your forgiveness." She crossed her arms. Her apron was wrinkled, her hands showed faint traces of ointment. She looked even stronger, more real, and more distant. "You judged me like everyone else, Bryan, but this time it hurt more." He swallowed hard, took a slow step forward. "I was wrong, truly, and I have no excuse. I was trying to protect my world, and I destroyed yours in the process." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. You didn't destroy my world. I just had to remember where it always was. I never belonged to that hotel, those crystal glasses. But I was honest. I was worthy. And you, even knowing everything about me, threw me away. I didn't throw you away. I lost you out of cowardice. And now you're here to do what? Save the day with another check? Bryan shook his head, eyes full of tears. No. I came to listen, that's all. I don't even know if you'll ever forgive me, but I needed to see you. I needed to look into your eyes and acknowledge who you are. And who do you think I am? Someone far stronger than I've ever been, and more genuine than anyone I've ever met. She took a deep breath. For a moment, the silence between them said more than any words. Then Sophia took a step back and pointed down the hall. I need to get back to work. Miss Evelyn gets scared if she wakes up and I'm not around. Sophia, please, don't follow me. He stopped, lowered his eyes, and respected her wish. She turned and walked slowly down the hallway, without looking back. But with every step she took, her chest tightened, because as much as she wanted to resist, part of her knew he hadn't come there out of pride, and part of him knew she wasn't ready to return, but she hadn't completely closed the door either. In the days that followed that painful reunion, Bryan Bennett couldn't sleep well. The image of Sophia in that humble hallway, dressed with dignity, rejecting every word he said with quiet strength, burned in his conscience more than any corporate scandal he had ever faced. He began avoiding the luxurious halls of his own hotels, the marble walls, the gold-plated mirrors, the fake smiles of people seeking contracts and flattery, all now seemed like a soulless theater. For the first time, he felt like a stranger within his own wealth. Sitting in his glass office overlooking the sea, he had an idea. His mother's portrait was on the shelf, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, who once, before dying of cancer, had told him with a weak voice, "When you don't know what to do with all you have, Bryan, give it to someone who truly knows what it means to live." He stood from his chair immediately. The next morning, his legal team was already working on the documents, and a week later, the new foundation was officially registered. Dolores Marine Foundation, named after Sophia's mother, whom he had never met, but who symbolized everything she stood for: struggle, care, and truth. The foundation would have 2 branches: full scholarships for underprivileged youth, especially children of immigrants, and community healthcare support for families stuck between abandonment and waiting. But he didn't stop there. He wanted it to be real, to have soul, to look like her. He went back to Savannah. He carried an envelope and an invitation. Sophia saw him through the reception window, and for a moment almost pretended it wasn't for her. But she couldn't. She came out from the hallway with a serious expression, clean uniform, and alert eyes. "You again? I told you I wouldn't give up." She crossed her arms. "What do you want now?" "I'm not here to explain myself. I came to give you something." He calmly opened the envelope and handed it to her. Sophia read in silence. Her eyes moved over the words foundation, scholarships, free medical care, and finally the name that nearly took her breath away: Dolores Marine. "That's my mother's name." "I know. I thought she deserved to live on through what you represent." She looked up, confused, vulnerable. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you taught me what it means to have value, and because I can't change what I did, but I can do things differently from now on." She stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she carefully closed the envelope as if it were fragile. "And what does this have to do with me?" "I want you to run the foundation." Sophia's eyes widened. "You're insane." "Maybe, but I know how to recognize someone who was born to care for lives. You already do that for a forgotten woman in a simple home. Imagine what you could do with a team, with structure, with a voice. This isn't charity, Sophia. It's trust, and I need you by my side." She looked away, feeling the tears threaten. The pain was still fresh, the cracks still there, but there was something new in his voice. It wasn't arrogance, it was surrender. "And what if I say I still can't trust you?" "I'll accept that, and wait, as long as it takes." She bit her lip, looked at the envelope again, and finally whispered, "I'll do it, but not for you, for my mother, for me, for those who still don't have a voice." He nodded slowly. "That's more than I deserve." Sophia turned to go, back into the nursing home. But before she crossed the doorway, she said without looking back, "You still have a lot to prove, Bryan. But today, you took the first step," and he smiled for the first time in a long time. Not the practiced CEO smile, but the smile of a man who had finally begun to rebuild. Little did he know, by giving her the foundation, he was also handing over the keys to his own new beginning. The first months of the Dolores Marin Foundation were marked by quiet meetings, tough decisions, and constant learning as two worlds tried to coexist. Bryan and Sophia now shared the same table, the same reports, the same mission, but with hearts still trying to understand each other. In the beginning, she kept her distance, arrived early, left on time, spoke firmly, and avoided any unnecessary conversation. But gradually the ice began to melt. The foundation wasn't just a structure, it was a shelter built from scars, and that united them more than they cared to admit. One rainy afternoon, after hours of reviewing the community scholarship program, Sophia shut the folder firmly and stared at Bryan. "You still think like an executive, Bryan. We're not selling reputation here. We're dealing with people who never had one." He looked at her, surprised by her bluntness, but not offended. "And how do you think I should think? Like someone who once needed help and was ashamed to ask for it." The silence between them was thick, but not hostile. Bryan took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. "That's why I need you here. Because I never needed until I saw what it's like to live without knowing what tomorrow brings." She held his gaze, but something had shifted in her expression. It wasn't anger anymore. It was respect. As the days passed, Bryan began to see her in a new way. She didn't assert herself with fancy words, but with actions that moved everyone around her. When one of the scholarship students lost his mother and showed up crying at the foundation's door, Sophia put down every paper, sat with him on the floor, and held him for half an hour, then returned to the meeting as if nothing had happened. "You don't have to choose between being strong and being human," he once said, after catching her drying tears alone in the foundation's bathroom. "And you don't have to look like you're in control all the time for people to respect you," she replied. In those honest exchanges, they started to change. He learned to listen, not with his ears, but with his heart. He began making decisions, with people in mind, not numbers. She, on the other hand, started to trust, not just him, but the idea that someone really could change from the inside without the speeches. Mornings became spaces for connection, nights for planning, and between conversations, the walls began to fall. Bryan started showing up with coffee just the way she liked it, no sugar, with almond milk. Sophia started smiling more, those kinds of smiles that come without meaning to and take a long time to fade. One night, while finishing a financial report, the power went out because of a sudden storm. They were stuck in the foundation's office, with the windows shaking and papers flying everywhere. "Looks like the universe wants to force a break," she said, gathering the sheets. "Or maybe it's just tired of us ignoring what really matters," he replied. She paused. They looked at each other in the dark, lit only by the emergency light. Bryan stepped a little closer, without invading her space. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What do you see when you look at me now?" She took her time to answer, then whispered, "Someone who's trying, and that is already much more than I expected." In that moment, the sound of the rain softened, and the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was intimate, safe, alive. It wasn't instant love, the kind found in fairy tales. It was love rooted in pain, watered by truth and slowly blooming. Between two people who had learned to recognize each other not by looks or past, but by essence. And they didn't know it yet, but they were getting closer to something neither of them dared to say aloud: belonging. The city of Charleston woke up different that morning. The sun filtered through the historic buildings as if it knew something important was about to happen. In the newspapers, on social media, and in corporate hallways, a last-minute announcement spread like wildfire. Bryan Bennett to make official statement on changes at Whitmore Holdings. In the main auditorium of the resort where it all began, journalists, executives, and NGO representatives gathered, expecting a traditional press conference, a new merger, record numbers, another billion-dollar deal. But what they found was a simple stage, just two microphones, a white backdrop with the logo of the Dolores Marin Foundation, and beside it, a row of young scholarship recipients with eyes full of hope. Bryan entered first. He wasn't wearing his usual dark suit, but a light shirt with rolled-up sleeves and no tie. He walked with a steady pace, but a new kind of posture, more human. At his side came Sophia, hair down, a simple navy blue dress, serene expression. Her heart beat fast, but her gaze remained steady. He stepped up to the microphones and looked out at the crowd. Took a deep breath. I grew up believing success was about conquering, accumulating, and commanding. I learned to measure my worth by the size of numbers and the silence of cold decisions. Until one day, a tired waitress told me with an ironic smile that all she really wanted was a day off. Some journalists exchanged curious glances. Sophia looked at him, moved, but never looked away. Bryan continued, and in that seemingly small moment I understood everything life had been trying to teach me, but that I always ignored. Because she didn't ask me for money or a promotion, she showed me what dignity looks like, courage, truth. He then turned partly toward her and said, his voice strong but emotional, "She taught me there's no greater luxury than being seen as human, and that sometimes love begins with a simple request for time off." The room fell completely silent. That's why today I'm announcing my temporary departure from the presidency of Whitmore Holdings. Not as an escape, but as a choice. Because I need to be fully present for what matters most now, building something that can't be bought, that can't be negotiated, something that's felt. Bryan reached out his hand to Sophia, and I want to do that with you. If you still want to walk this path with me. She looked at him. For a second, time stopped. There was no audience, no cameras, no expectations, just two hearts that had recognized each other in pain and were now choosing redemption. She walked up to him and hugged him slowly, deeply. A hug not of forgiveness, but of acceptance, of a new beginning. The cameras captured the moment. The flashes lit up the emotion on her face as she finally allowed herself to smile without weight. And the audience stood in applause. Bryan rested his face against her hair and whispered, "You set me free." And Sophia replied quietly, "And you taught me I don't have to fight alone anymore." That night, the video of the press conference went viral, not because it was another millionaire's gesture to save face, but because it was a real gesture. Honest, unfiltered, and the greatest lesson that remained among all the headlines and comments was simple. Sometimes the simplest gestures reveal the deepest truths. True love isn't born from power, but from shared vulnerability. And now that this story has come to an end, I want to hear from you. What did you think of this journey of love, resilience, and transformation? Leave your score from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me what touched you most in this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs this message, And of course, subscribe to the channel to follow other stories just as powerful. But before you go, stay with me. I've selected another moving, even deeper story that's sure to touch your heart. Just click on the screen and keep this journey going with us. You won't regret it.